Hello.
Hey,
I
Matt.
am here to it's good to see you, Kermit.
Good to see you.
I am here today with Kermit Cook, the CEO of the Penn Foster Group. Penn Foster has a long history in the education space, as does Kermit. We're going to talk about all of that in a little bit. But before we do, Kermit, would you just mind telling us about your sort of story arc and how you ended up where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. And probably the place to start, Matt, and we've known each other for a while, so you know some of this. I I'm a teacher and a coach at heart. Both of my parents are educators. Actually, had the opportunity to have dinner with them just a couple of nights ago. My dad was a college professor for many, many years, and my mom was a high school French teacher. She was my French teacher. Actually, before later in life, retiring from teaching high school, and she went back to school. She went to seminary and became a minister. So she finished her life, as we were joking about at dinner a couple nights ago. She gets to keep teaching. Uh, so she finishes her life still as a teacher, but she doesn't have to grade
Yeah.
papers anymore. So that's like the best of all worlds. Um, anyway, I provide that context because it ultimately led me to teach early in my career with Teach for America. I taught high school physics and physical science in St. Louis, and I coached basketball and tennis. Even though I'm a terrible tennis player, that's what happens when you're at a school. You wear many hats. And I'll take a minute on that thread if it's okay, Matt, because the school where I taught had a really strong career education program. And so they had a pathway that helped to prepare students to go into healthcare fields like medical assisting. They had a great partnership with Lambert Airport, which is the airport in St. Louis, where we had old airplane engines in the basement of the school. And the retired airline mechanics who taught the kids, and the kids who graduated from that program went straight into a paid apprenticeship program at the airport. And I'm actually still connected with some of my former students who went through that program and are now senior engineers at GE Aviation and have had this amazing lifelong career that wouldn't have been open to them or feasible for them through the traditional college route. And so, my career arc that really inspired my connection with how do we provide really affordable and flexible and faster paths to better jobs for people. It really opened my eyes to the importance of that, which brought me ultimately to Penn Foster. I spent a few years after teaching. I went to grad school and then worked in private equity for a number of years, but always with a vision of getting back to the world of education. That is where we met when I joined Cengage. For those who are familiar with Cengage, traditional higher ed publisher today, an education business across a number of different areas. And from there, came here to Penn Foster about a year and a half ago.
That's exciting. And I think we could spend a ton of time on the sort of increasing blurring of the lines between sort of career education and traditional education. Um, I was talking to Peter Cohen last week about the work that he's
Hmm.
doing with the aircraft mechanics school, and
Yeah.
so a place of dire need. Um, maybe and sorry, I can't stop myself from digging in immediately. But before we get there, could you also just say a little bit more about what Penn Foster does specifically? And I think blurring of the lines between traditional and career is sort of right in the sweet spot for what you guys do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those who don't know, Penn Foster is an accredited high school and college, career focused college. We do uh, radically affordable, asynchronous learning to help people get to degrees and credentials that get them better jobs. That is our mission and focus. We are on a path to graduate 90,000 learners this year, roughly half of those with a high school diploma, nationally accredited high school diploma, and the other half in our career programs that are focused on healthcare, so allied health fields, vet, we're the largest trainer of vet techs in the country, and in trades like auto mechanics, electricians, HVAC technicians. And it might, should I take a minute, Matt, on a little bit about the history of Penn Foster? Because, the story for how we got here is
It's pretty cool. Yeah, and maybe just to give a specific emphasis on it, maybe to talk about modality and how the modality has changed. And that's something I think we got to experience at Cengage too, of seeing a large institutional player change in a pretty dramatic way. And Penn Foster, I think, has undergone a pretty similar change over the past, 15, 20 years, and ended up in a new and, you know, just as, if not more compelling place as it maybe it started with.
yeah. So I think Penn Foster could probably rightfully claim to be the oldest, certainly one of the oldest virtual schools in the country, if not the world. So we're founded in 1890 in Scranton, Pennsylvania by Thomas Foster as a correspondence course serving coal miners. And the real mission for Thomas Foster originally was teaching coal miners skills that would help them to get a more safe job. And so what I find really compelling about that origin story is, if you think about the learners who Thomas Foster was serving and wanting to serve at that time, they were primarily immigrants who the traditional system was not serving them and not helping them to open doors. And he saw an opportunity to do that in a different way. Uh, and that's really still fundamentally the same mission that we're serving today. The company for over a century was a paper-based correspondence course. And actually, I'll share this with you. I keep this on my desk as a reminder of that. This is from actually the early 1900s, I think 1916. It is the accounting course that Penn Foster used in its correspondence course. And they would
Wow.
literally mail these out, and there's assignments in there. And there was a building in Scranton that for some time was its own zip code because of the amount of paper that would come in and out, because we had teams of graders that would grade these assignments as they would flow in and out from our learners around the country. Eventually became an accredited institution. So we've been accredited as of next year, will be 100 years. So far, 99 years accredited by DEAC. And so have been issuing degrees and nationally recognized degrees in that way over that time. Um, so let me pause there. Anywhere you want to go deep before I go into kind of the more recent transition away from being a paper-based correspondence course?
Maybe just because you brought it up, we could talk about the meaning of accreditation. I think it's one of those words where, like, if you Google the, like, definition of it, it's sort of flimsy. Like, it's sort of like, an institution has the backing of another institution who is usually, and I think this is the case with DIAC just as much as the regional accreditors, is sort of based on peer review. So there's less sort of uh, empirical analysis behind it than sort of social acceptance of the word accredited. And I think that there's a lot behind it, and there's a reason that Penn Foster has existed for 100 years, right? It's not just because of accreditation. That's part of the overall package. Could you just talk about that and, like, why why it makes sense to stay accredited, but what you might do in addition to the accreditation process to make sure that your courses sort of retain value?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely believe in the importance of accreditation for us and for our learners. And there's a bunch of layers of this. There's the overall institutional accreditation, and then also accreditation for specific programs that we're focused on for our learners. And if I come back to the reason why, Matt, your original question, the learners who we are serving, uh, first and foremost, are mostly looking for great entry level positions. And we are focused on trying to be a leader to help somebody get from a high school diploma to a skilled job that doesn't require a bachelor's degree. For these learners, I don't believe fundamentally in the concept of stackable credentials leading them to that start. I really believe that what they need is something that is a nationally recognized certification or credential that they walk into any employer and they say, "Oh, okay, I see you have passed the AVMA certification to be a veterinary technician, and you've that means you've demonstrated the skills I need. You're qualified for me to hire you." They uh the that is what they need. And those accrediting bodies serve as the arbiter and signal of, yes, this programming that the student graduated from includes all the requirements to be able to demonstrate that skill that they need. And so I do think it is really critically important for our learners because it is the best signal for these entry level jobs on a national level that they have developed the right skills. When we think about the programs that we invest in intentionally and strategically for our strategy, we're focused on a pathway for somebody from a minimum wage, often retail job, into something that pays them a living wage and healthcare benefits. Those are the types of credentials that they need.
And how do you sort of pick that out, right? Is it sort of like you look at the universe of nationally recognized credentials and say, okay, this one's next? Or is it you say, we see there's a ton of jobs in this field. It doesn't yet have a nationally recognized credential. Let's work with our accrediting bodies or what have you, maybe accrediting bodies and employers.
Yeah.
He says, sort of hopefully, and make one. Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah. Our we have not tried to make one. We've tried to we've tried to leverage ones where there is where employers already recognize a credential. And importantly, when we think about what jobs we're going to be training people for and where we're going to build and invest in programs, we focus on two things. One is what is the fundamental supply demand gap for that job? Is there a real need that we can help solve by helping to bring more learners in a radically affordable way into those careers? And then secondly, what people are earning uh, when they come out. We want to make sure that we really are making a material difference in terms of income and outcomes. And so we use a bunch of different data sources, whether it's from Cast or Bureau of Labor Statistics, but to really triangulate and think about those jobs. And then for us overall, right now, we're strategically focused on investing, as I said before, in healthcare programs to expand what we're doing there, and then in trades. And we're already very well established in vet tech. If I double click underneath that, we are investing more in programs that require hands-on skills because we want to make sure that our learners are able to really demonstrate skills that give them an AI defensible job. And we've got a lot of experience as an organization connecting learners with externships and really tangible hands-on skills that will make sure that their earnings power and their jobs persist for a long time.
I just want to make a note that it is possible to have a conversation about education that doesn't include the word
Yeah.
AI for almost 15 minutes.
Almost. We
So,
could have kept
you know,
going because
I think that's good. No, I think that's a win, right?
this was more about being AI defensible.
Right, exactly. So I think like, I think most conversations are under that amount. So thank you for doing that. And
I do
I
want to
think this
just
is
go back. Let
important.
me just go back one second because I kind of skipped over this on the accreditation. I've got a lot of thoughts on accrediting bodies overall, but we just finished our renewal with DEAC. Um, And so just to give a context for those who haven't been part of it, like what does that mean? So our accreditation renewal was approved in July. The process kicked off last March. And as you said, there was a peer review. So there were a number of individuals, both professors and administrators from other institutions that DEAC brought onto the committee to review Penn Foster. And for every one of the programs that are a part of our reaccreditation, they had somebody who had expertise in that field. And so for our vet program, for example, is a part of our college program. It's an associate degree program. It's somebody who had experience in teaching vet as the representative accreditor for that program. And so they took a selection. They didn't review every single thing that we teach, but they took a selection of those and evaluated our programs relative to the standards that we're teaching to. And then there's a number of overall institutional standards we have that they have defined specifically for an asynchronous virtual school. How do you provide learner support? What does the learner experience look like? Your instructors, credentials, etc. And so it was a long and detailed process, right? It is a peer review process, but it's one I frankly was quite impressed, having been the first time that I went through with TIAC and a reaccreditation, the thoughtfulness and the rigor in how they approached it. And so they interviewed current students of every program they reviewed. They interviewed alumni. They went through our curriculum relative to the standards that we said. They went through our enrollment practices. And we actually learned a lot as well. They shared things and observations based on what they've seen from other schools. And so it's a peer review process, but the way I would think about it is it's peer review like rigorous scientific journals are peer review. And some, um, there's a lot of kind of political discussion around accreditation and accrediting bodies, and there's certainly administration and bureaucracy around it as well. But I do fundamentally believe that at its core, many of these institutions are trying to make sure they're setting standards and defining a process that we can define a level of consistency and rigor that an institution is delivering what they say they are.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And, I think what's always sort of struck me about the accreditation process is there's a certain, and I know your mom taught French. Is it je ne sais quoi?
Je ne
That's
sais quoi.
horrible. Yeah, to how it works, right? Of like you and I can sit in a room and we sort of know if a class or a course or a program is being taught well, but it's really hard to lay down in, a set of like rigid standards, right? So I think that sort of interplay between sort of social acceptance of like, yeah, you and I and the vet expert can sort of come to a consensus, but it's often sort of hard to articulate why, right? And I think to our sort of joke about AI is, you know, that is the struggle, right? Of putting all that goes into learning into a rigid, deterministic software language is really freaking hard. Um, and I think that is defensible on many ways. We talked last week about, is accreditation the defensible moat that, a lot of just sort of more standard enterprise software doesn't have. So I don't know if that triggers any more thoughts.
It does, and it's certainly imperfect in many ways, right? Because yes, like they went through this rigorous process, but are they checking every single course that we have? Can they evaluate every single teacher? And do we fall down and not live up to the experience we would like to deliver with many of our students? Absolutely. Our completion rates as an organization are 35% right now. It's not as high as it should be, and we should come back to that. That said, it's a process that does have some real thought and rigor behind it. And at least for the foreseeable future, for many, many jobs, I think it's going to be the best signal that employers have. And so I do think, to your question about is this a defensible moat in a world where you can create courses much faster, you can create content and better learning experiences much faster, I do think it's one of the defensible moats that an institution like ours have, because if I'm a veterinarian, it's going to be a very, very long time before I'm comfortable hiring from somebody who says, "Hey, I learned how to be vet tech through my OpenAI developed vet tech course that has no rigor, credentials, or peer review around it." I'm like,
Totally.
maybe not. right? And you wouldn't want to take your dog who was wandering around on the couch a few minutes ago to that vet if he did.
No, definitely
So
not.
I think it will create like there's a reason why the institutions exist and why that structure has developed over time to try to be able to create some level of consistency. It's not going to go away overnight.
I think that's really important. And I think that to me is probably the biggest question of this AI wave, right? Of, by the same token, many, I'm not going to name names here, but many of the like course and program providers, accredited and non accredited right now, are leveraging LLMs and other AI tools to reduce their course creation costs, right? So that course offered by OpenAI is probably closer to reality than a lot of people realize. And yet, I think this point about all the hard work that you and your team have put in for literally 120 years matters,
135,
right? 135
135.
years. It matters, right? There like it's hard to articulate why, but it does, right? And I think that is, for me as a market analyst, something I really wrestle with of like, how do I put that into words for people to understand?
Yeah, I would articulate it, or the way I've really thought about it, Matt, is you're right. OpenAI can create the set of content and even some great videos around what a vet tech is. But actually, you could have gone and bought the textbooks for the last however many years and had those, and that would have been great content. And yes, maybe not quite as interactive as OpenAI, but still kind of the same. Fundamentally, AC, like learning on your own without a practiced instructor and teacher is really, really hard. Right? There's a reason why great teachers exist, and it's a lot more than just being able to know how to do the Socratic method. Is you need to be able to strike that right balance on being able to show up in the way that learners need in the moment. And so I don't think that is going away. I do think AI is going to commoditize bad teaching and learning. You're going to be able, you can get that for free very quickly. Uh, but really good teaching and learning that gets the good outcomes is going to be even more valuable because it's going to be bringing something that really differentiates. And that's actually, I mean, it comes back to part of the Penn Foster story and why I was so excited to join a year and a half ago, because too much of our experience uh, was rooted in what our strength was also our Achilles heel, right? We had this long legacy. We had a fantastic foundation as a correspondence course, but by definition, a correspondence course is a pretty flat and not particularly interactive learning experience. The opportunity we have now and the what we are investing in is how we take that to a much more active learning experience and leverage the scale of students we're teaching. Again, we have 90,000 graduates a year. We have roughly 5,000 learners every week who are enrolling. And with the not just AI, but how we can now use the data with our Databricks model, tracking how learners are engaging to be able to start to figure out when is it that Matt gets stuck and how do I intervene and how do I help them get to more success? We can start to deliver really effective teaching and learning in a much more affordable and scalable way than we would have even just 5 or 6 years ago.
Maybe I just to riff on that, can you talk about, it's the year is 2030. What does a Penn Foster course look like? What are some of the differences? And I get, 5 years feels like eons if we think back to like 2020 and what the world looked like. But like, what is that? What are some of the even themes of the courses that look the same versus those that look different? And that can be modality, that can be other sort of pedagogical, choices, that can be the way the students interact together or with other teachers. You choose your own adventure on this answer, but just thinking, a little further out than the next 12 months.
We won't have time to play it, but actually Thais Lero, who you know as well, leads our product organization. She and her team recently created a video that shares what our vision of what that product experience
Cool.
looks like
I'd love to see it after.
years from now. So I'll share it with you afterwards. But it really is about how we can go from an experience today that is way too one size fits all to something that is still getting people to the recognized skills and credentials they need in a much more differentiated way based on what they need at the right time. And so when you think about, let me actually just use a very practical, tangible example to give you
Yeah,
a feel
please.
for it now, Matt. So again, we'll graduate 45,000 high school learners today. The majority of those are traditional age high school students who the current system isn't serving them in the right way. But we also have learners who are in their mid to late 30s who are working, who are parents, but they never graduated from high school and they need a diploma to get a better job. Right now, that experience is fundamentally the same for those two learners. And so you actually don't need a lot of sophisticated AI for us to do better with that. But what we can start to do, and what the vision is in a very practical way, is starting to be able to just have a conversation with them with their own coach at the start of the experience to say, okay, Matt, you're coming on board. Tell me about your life. What's going on for you? When is it that you'd like to study? When do you have time to study? What are you worried about? Oh, you haven't been to school in 15 years. You're nervous about writing assignments. You haven't written an essay. Is writing a part of this? Okay. Now we can start to know when you, Matt, as a learner, are likely much more in advance, may run into challenges and can start to bring humans in the loop at the right time to help you out. I'll give you an example on the first step of that journey right now. So today, I brought up writing intentionally because right now across our programs, we have roughly 20,000 learners a year who drop out in a writing assignment. And it's very telling for me when I talk with those learners. Many of them, I said, I remember one student in particular, um, who ended up like working through and graduating from high school. But she said, I got to that essay I was supposed to write. I haven't written anything that didn't have an emoji in it in like 10 years. And you wanted me to write an argumentative essay with inline references. I was like, this isn't happening, right? And but what we have started to do now, we've worked with Learnosity, who I believe you know. Gavin Cooney and team actually joined one of our team town halls recently to talk about this work, and they helped us develop a real-time writing feedback tutor that would allow you, Matt, to come on and say, "Oh, well, I haven't written anything in a long time. How I start with this assignment? Okay, just start writing. Just write your thoughts. Don't worry about it." And the AI tutor can provide real-time feedback to be able to help you get started and say, that's a great start. I love these thoughts. Here's the things that you need to work on to get to success. And then if we see now that Mac is stuck in that assignment for a little bit too long, one of our agents can reach out to you automatically, our AI agents, and say, Matt, I see you're still in that writing assignment a couple weeks in. Can I set up time for you with one of our writing coaches? So that now we can start to scale and leverage our coaches and our teachers to focus on the people who need the help at the right time, and use their time much more productively.
I think what's so poignant about that story is it might happen in the classroom, but it's almost equally, if not more likely to happen outside the classroom. And I think it's understanding that the, quote unquote school of the future is not just the classroom, but it's the entire picture, right? And learning how to be more intentional as a provider when and how to deploy humans to be at their most effective, right? Like it's necessary but not sufficient to have a teacher in the classroom, right? That's like just supplying the teachers and just supplying the coursework is not the school. It's not like that's the way it's been. It's not the
Yeah,
way it will be going forward. And it's saying like, yeah, like writing that essay, you might just need to warm up. You might
my
just
kids.
need,
Yeah,
write.
when I was a teacher, Debbie Rice, who was the master teacher next door to me, that I'm so thankful for her mentorship. She uh she taught me on day one be ready. And I had gone to Home Depot and bought shower board and cut them into individual squares. So each student had their own whiteboard markers and their own cloth and their own shower board. So then they could work on problems on whiteboards that were easily erasable. And I found that for my students, the opportunity to do something on a whiteboard that they knew wasn't permanent just lowered the risk. And we're
Yeah,
seeing the
totally.
same thing. This writing example just really sticks with me as the same thing, right? A learner who's like, oh, here's the writing essay, submit here. How do I get started? Okay, let me give you this opportunity in a very low stakes way to just start trying and get real time feedback from an AI feedback tool that has no human judgment associated with it. And it really lowers the stakes for that trial.
Yeah, and understanding that she probably has the skills, or at the very least, learning the skill is very much accessible to her if she's given the right tools at the right time.
Let
So
me let
I
me
really like,
quickly let
yeah,
me add one more point on this, Matt, that has stuck out with me as we have been trying things. And again, one of our benefits as an organization, we have 5,000 new students starting every week, and our learning design team and our product teams are really building muscle around being able to just try something new every week and see what works and what doesn't work in order to help get to better learner outcomes. One of the things that we have tested, as you would expect, is having an AI coach along the side. And if you need help, right, tap into this, and it's like a tutor on demand. And at least our initial trials with it has had zero measurable impact on persistence. Shocking for me.
0.
Zero measurable impact on persistence. And
Fascinating.
as we have dug into the data on this, what we found is lots of learners accessed the AI coach. They were learners who the data told us were most likely to
We're
persist
already gonna
anyway.
persist.
They
Got it.
were the student who, at the end of the lecture in the traditional
Yeah.
higher ed classroom, was up at the front talking with the professor and the TA, and they're going to be fine anyway. The kid who was in the back falling asleep the entire lecture because he or she had been out too late the night before, they're not
We're
clicking on
working.
the computer. Or working out too late because they were working, right?
Right.
Because they were taking care of their family,
Yes.
because they had life that they were dealing with. They weren't clicking on the tutor. And so that is why, again, I come back to this question of, is AI going to disrupt good teaching and learning? There's so much more that goes into it. And that is one of our lessons as we've been going. There's great tools and great concepts, but actually so much more comes into knowing who you are, Matt, and what you need in that moment, and creating the right design experience, the right pedagogical experience that's going to meet that learner when they need. And also, very importantly, knowing when we need to bring the human who's in the loop in to really bring the personal connection and accountability that's so important to good teaching.
Yeah. Well, Kermit, you've been very generous with your time. I wish we could go on longer. I have a whole set of questions around the historic tension between accessibility and depth that I think we're starting to bridge with some of these AI tools, and maybe that can be our follow-up of how you do this at scale, right? And you are one of the largest providers of this type of training in the US and probably the world. I say that hesitantly just because I don't know, but I know certainly in the US.
Well,
Um,
our mission, our focus in North Star as an organization is within the next 4 years to get to 150,000 learners graduating from our programs, importantly with the skills they need for those jobs. And there's some other large institutions doing the same, and there's more than enough learners for all of us to serve, that the need is even greater than that. So I think of it as a good start.
well, I am excited to follow along as y'all continue to grow, and I hope we can do this again in 5 years, and we can reset the goal
Sounds
of
like
what
a
the
plan.
classroom of the future looks like. So,
Sounds like a
thank
plan.
you, Kermit, for your time, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Matt.